At this moment in time, can you talk about how many options are on the floor regarding the mask bylaw?
Well, there are 4 options that have been given, of which 2 are on the floor. One of them is to rescind the mask bylaw when the province does, which will be probably on Canada Day. Though interestingly, they said last week that they will rescind the provincial mask bylaw except in certain circumstances. And they never told us what the certain circumstances were. So I don't know what that means. The second is to wait a little while longer and to rescind the mask bylaw later in July, as long as all the numbers are moving in the right direction. So fundamentally, it's one of these situations where council is going to tie itself in knots about this, but it really is a difference of a few weeks. So it may not really make that much of a difference, but let's see where council ends up.
The word confusion and confusing came up a few times this morning. I mean, we had a situation last year where the city had its mask bylaw in place and the province didn't. Why would this be confusing?
I don't think it's confusing at all. I have more faith perhaps in citizens than some of my colleagues do. I think it's pretty straightforward. We follow the rules that are in place, and we had the masking bylaw in place several months before the province did. And we went from 30% or so of people wearing masks to over 97% overnight. And compliance has remained extremely high ever since.
Why is Delta a special consideration for Calgary?
So I am quite concerned about the Delta variant, and I hate being a downer. So let me start by saying Calgary is crushing this. Like, we have among the highest vaccination doses in the world. We are absolutely finishing strong. We're coming to the end of the pandemic. All of that is great. I just want to make sure we finish the race, that we don't stumble right at the finish line. And one of the things I'm concerned about is the Delta variant. So the Delta variant is doubling. I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm going to give you a guesstimate. When we had the second wave, we were seeing a doubling of that variant about every 18 days. And the Delta variant is doubling almost every week. And so it's a real fast doubling, and exponential growth is really happening. We anticipate the Delta variant will be the dominant variant, certainly this summer, maybe even by the end of this month. And the problem is the Delta variant, unlike the previous ones, is very resistant to only one dose of vaccine. So when the province made its open for summer plan, this wasn't the case. And they were really focused on the first dose. And I just feel like we need to be focused a bit more on the second dose. Our second dose rates are really good. Congratulations, folks. But I know that right now there's no appointments available. And so I just want to make sure enough people have their second dose so that when the Delta variant wave comes, most people will be protected.
There's been discussion today about why the city gets to make its own decision about this particular thing when, the city doesn't have a health policy and this is slightly out of step with what the province is recommending province-wide. So why do you think that this is something that the city should look at and decide based on the local circumstances?
I think there's a couple of things. Number one is the local circumstances in Calgary are different. So Dr. Henshaw has to make a decision for the whole province. But the vast majority of Delta variant cases in the province are in Calgary. And so our local situation is different. Number two is the province told us to, right? Last year, the province was not willing to make province-wide rules, and they asked the municipalities to do it ourselves. So you can't kind of be coming and going. If you do it one way, you have to do it the other way, I think. And number three is we have a special responsibility in the city. We have a responsibility to our employees, the folks who work in transit, as well as in city facilities. And we have a special duty of care to our customers who are also our citizens. So people who ride transit, people who spend time in city-owned facilities. And so ultimately, it's not that the city is just making stuff up. In fact, perhaps more so than the province, because we don't have ego at stake here. We have been consulting with the best experts from around the world to better understand what cities that look like us, that have cases like us, are doing, and what the best practices might be.
Masks on transit seem to be kind of the happy medium we're hoping to achieve here with this.
The folks in Calgary Transit are not particularly excited about stigmatizing transit riders. I think it is a minimum. I think we do have to have that because when you're riding transit, you don't always have the choice. And this is the critical thing. Over the course of the summer, people will make choices. They'll make choices based on what they're comfortable with. Some people are super excited about Stampede this week. Some people wouldn't touch the Stampede with a 10-foot pole. But when you think about the cab drivers and the bus drivers and the people who are on transit to get to where they need to go, they don't get that choice. If I got to ride transit to go to work and I'm surrounded by people who are super excited about the Stampede, that's not really my choice. And so ultimately, that's really what we have to get our heads around, is making sure we're protecting people for whom there is no choice. There's still about 500,000 Calgarians who are not vaccinated, many of whom cannot be vaccinated. They might be children, they might be people who have some sort of medical condition preventing them from being vaccinated. So we have to keep an eye on them as well as on everyone else.
Qu'est-ce qui vous ferait pencher d'un bord plus que d'un autre en fonction de ce que vous avez entendu, en fonction de la montée du variant Delta? Vous, personnellement, qu'est-ce que vous retenez et qu'est-ce qui influencerait votre décision?
Maintenant, j'écoute très forcément toutes les discussions sur le sujet. Pour moi, à ce moment-ci, je crois que c'est prudent d'entendre un petit peu, de voir ce qui se passe avec le variant Delta et ce qui se passe avec les taux de vaccination ici, particulièrement les taux de deuxième dose.
Et qu'est-ce que vous répondez à Jason Kenney qui, lui, s'attend à ce que vous suiviez, la ville de Calgary, la ville d'Edmonton, suivent la recommandation d'un médecin hygiéniste en chef? Qu'est-ce que vous lui répondez?
Elle nous a dit l'été passé que c'était important pour nous de faire des décisions régionales pour notre ville, parce que c'était trop difficile pour lui de faire des décisions provinciales. Donc, s'il a dit ça l'été passé, peut-être il va dire ça maintenant. Mais c'est important aussi de comprendre que peut-être il n'y a pas beaucoup de crédibilité avec le gouvernement d'Alberta sur ces choses-ci. On a peut-être commencé un peu plus tard, on peut éviter des restrictions un peu plus tôt. Et donc pour nous, c'est vraiment une question de science, une question d'expertise. Maybe I'll repeat that in English. So, one of the challenges here is the credibility that the government of Alberta brings into this conversation. You know, it's been pretty clear over the last year and a half that sometimes they put on the restrictions a little late, sometimes they pulled them off a little early. Certainly our waves have been higher and deeper, perhaps than we've seen in other places. So ultimately, while I have an enormous amount of respect for the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Henshaw, and she's got a hard job, the political decisions that the government of Alberta have made have perhaps not been the best. And so it's a bit funny for me to hear members of council saying, we have to follow the government of Alberta, when in fact, we've often been complaining that the government of Alberta's decisions lack a lot of credibility.
But if the Delta situation, which is significantly higher, or I guess a greater risk in terms of Calgary than other regions, why do you think Dr. Henshaw didn't single it out?
You know, we've asked Dr. Henshaw and her team to come to City Council many, many times. They will not do so that's a question for her.
Can I ask about the border? Obviously with Stampede on July 9th, July 5th, fully vaccinated people coming internationally to Canada don't have to quarantine in hotels anymore. I guess maybe could I get your thoughts on that?
I believe it's only fully vaccinated Canadian citizens and permanent residents. So it's not tourists from around the world.
Okay.
No, I'm actually very happy to see this, because despite what some people may characterize me at, I want to get back to a better life for all of us. And so to me, that science makes a ton of sense. If you're 2 weeks dose plus, if your second dose plus 2 weeks, what else are we going to ask you to do? So to me, it makes a ton of sense that fully vaccinated people who show a negative COVID test should be able to come back to Canada without quarantine. I'm pleased to see that, and I know that's going to lead to a lot of reunions of families, and I think that's a wonderful thing. All right, thank you, everybody.